Okay, we're going to look at Chapter 5 now, and we're going to look at arrays, using arrays. So an array is just a list. So you make lists all the time, and an array is a list, just like you make all the time, but you're going to use it in your programming, and it's going to be like a list of things or like a set of things. And the only thing that's special about an array is that they all have to be of the same data type. So if you have an array with an integer, all the elements have to be in integers in the array. You can't have like some of them as integers and some of them as doubles, or some of them as integers and some of them as strings. And he says in previous chapters you worked with simple data types, namely integer and string. Although these data types are useful, of course, more complex programs call for working with data structures, which is a group of data elements that are organized into a single unit. And an array is just like that. It's a group of elements. He says arrays are just lists of data, but they have to have a single data type, so all integer or all double, all string. So we know that to define a string, we do something like this. To define an array, you do something like this. Okay, so it looks a little different than the other one. The other one looks like this, strname as string. And this one looks almost the same. strname, and then this, 9, as string. And what this will do is create an array of 10 elements that will all have to be string types. Now, we said earlier that usually we start counting with 0. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10 elements. Okay? So this doesn't create just one string. Actually, it creates an array that can contain 10 strings. Then if you want to set different elements of the array with different values, you can do something like this. So this will set the third value, remember this is the third value, in the array to Katie. And so then if you did this, you would, well, you can't see that, can you? Then if you did this, you would see Katie in the message box. And you could set the fourth element of the array to Betty, like this. Remember, the array is called this, string name. Okay, so make a form like this as part of your homework. Call it array demo, and add a list box and give it this name, and set the integral height property to false. And add a button control with this, and text is the property is this, so that you get something like this. Okay, double click the button and add the following bolded code to its click event handler. He says when you do that, you'll receive an error message that the clear list procedure is not defined. You can ignore this error because you'll be adding that procedure in the next step. So we add this clear list. Then we define an array. This is an array of size 5, because this is 4. And then we assign the values to each element in the array like this. And then we add something to our list box. What are we going to add? We're adding this, which is the first element in the array. So we're adding Wendy. Now we create the clear list method and save it. And then if you run it, when the form displays, click the array element button, and the list box on your form will be populated with the name Wendy. Populated means the name Wendy will be entered into your box. Okay, let's read what he says. When you define an array, you have a specific data type and a size, right? Here. We have data type of string and a size of 5, actually 5 elements. In this case, you're specifying an array of type string and defining an array of size 5. Recall that the way the size is defined is a little quirky. You have to specify a number 1 less than the final size you want. Okay, so we do 4 even though we want 5. After you've done something like this, so you've defined the array, when you're done, you have an array, and you can access each element in the array by using an index. The index is given as a number in parentheses after the name of the array. Indices begin at 0 and go up to 1 less than the number of items in the array. So I can access the third element in the array with this. And if I want to assign j to that, I'll say j equals that. Okay? And you can not only assign something to this element, but you can also display this element or access the value of this element just by writing this. So if I want to display Wendy, I can just write this. In other words, I can just write it here, like that, and that will display Wendy in the message box. Now here he describes why indices are 0-based. So you can read this. Okay? All right, but if you want to read it, stop the video because we're going to continue. And here we have our method called clearList. Okay, so we now know how to define an array, how to assign elements to individual parts of the array, or individual elements of the array, and we also know how to display individual elements of the array. Okay, now let's go to using a for each next loop and reading elements from an array each time we go through the loop. So he says it's common to use an array when you're using the for each next loop. It happens a lot. In fact, he said we saw this loop in chapter 4, and we used it with a string collection returned from here. Remember, we got the directories from, I think it was the directories under the C drive, and then we wrote them down. So that was actually like kind of like an array. Okay, now let's try something else. Working with a new form. So close the form that you had before. No, I'm sorry, don't close it. Sorry. In the same form, I hope you didn't close it, or if you did, open it up again. And now, not in the button click event, but above the button click event, up here, just below the public class form, put this in, private string strFriends4 as string. So that's different than what we had before. We had this before. So that don't put it in here, put it up here. Okay, now mine doesn't have the code in here, but that's okay. Yours does have the code in here. But put it up here, above this. And then he says, in the class name combo box at the top left of your code editor, select Form1 events. That means here, select Form1 events. And then in here, There's many events that we can use, and he wants to use the load event. And when you do that, then you should have a new event available, this one, the form1 load event. So before we have a button click event, but now we also have a form1 load event. And what this means is as soon as the form is loaded, as soon as you see the form, this event will be run or called. So he says in the method name combo box at the right of your code editor, select the load event. This causes the form1 load event handler to be inserted into your code. Add the following bolded code into this procedure. So add this, or actually add all of this. Okay, so you're going to populate the array. That means you're going to fill in the elements of the array as soon as it gets loaded. As soon as the form appears, then it will be loaded. Sorry, then the array will be populated. Then he says add another button to the form. In other words, switch to the form designer and add another button control. So here I didn't name my button, but you should have. Then add another button like this. This is the name, and this is the text property. Double click this button and first clear the list, so put in the clear the list method. And now we're going to have a for each loop. Now if you go back and recall what the for each loop did before, we had code like this, and we had for each this in the directories, under the C directory. For each directory under the C directory, we did something, right? So that was basically an array of all of the directory names under the C drive. Now going back to what we're doing now, we have this array called string friends. For each something in string friends. So this part here just says, this is just a way of addressing each of the elements in here. So we say, it doesn't matter what you call this here. It could call it X, you could call it Y, you could call it anything. They're calling it string name. It doesn't matter what you call it. You could say for each X as string in here. It would be the same thing. And then, so we're going to go through each one of the elements in here, and this thing is going to stand for or represent each one of these elements. So the first time through the loop, it's going to stand for Wendy. And the second time through the loop, this is going to stand for Harriet. And the third time through the loop, this is going to stand for Jay, and so on. So what are we going to do? We're going to do something that looks like with the list box items. We're going to add. What are we going to add? Well, in the first time through the loop, we're going to add whatever this is equal to, but this is equal to Wendy the first time through. So we're going to add Wendy's name to the list box. Then the next time through the loop, this is going to stand for the second element in here. And so we're going to add that again, but it's going to be the second element, so it's going to be Harriet and so on. So we're going to get this over here. So what does he say? He says chapter 4 shows the for each next loop iterate through a string collection. In this example, it is used in an array. So it's a little different, but it's like an array before, and it is an array this time. The principle is similar. You create a control variable. What did we mean by the control variable? That's the thing I said could be X or Y, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. If I called it X, of course, I'd have to put X here. So he says, in this example is used in the principle is similar. You create a control variable that is of the same type as the elements in the array. So I guess we have to be careful, since our array was defined up here as string, then in the for next loop, which is here, for each loop, sorry, this, as I said, this could be X, it could be Y, it could be anything, but this has to be a string, since all the elements in the array are strings, okay, in string friends in our array. So he says, create this control variable and then give it to the loop when the loop starts. This has all been done in one line of code. The control variable here is declared and used in the for each statement by using the as string keyword. So he's saying that we did it all in one line, meaning we did this as string in one line, and then also this in the same line. He also says, note that the items are added to the list in the same order that they appear in the array. That's because the for each next proceeds from the first item to the last item as each item is defined.